This will be item C, approval of the agenda. So this is approved agenda for today, June 9th, regular planning commission meeting.
Move to approve the agenda for June 9, 2025.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Very good. This is item D, citizens' comments. So at this point, we would allow anybody who want to comment on any item to feel free and speak and place the first and last name and their address. If you are here for the R1 open hearing, and you can state your name, first and last name during that time and speak at leisure. So, Mr. Chair, at this point, you want to open citizens' comments?
Open citizens' comments.
Very good. This gentleman here is for the R1, and sorry he's here for the H1, and most of these other people you probably know, so.
Alright, looks like we'll close citizens' comments.
Very good. This is item E, consent agenda. So this is to approve the minutes from May 12th, 2025, regular planning commission meeting. Just as a refresher, we had the rezoning, case number zone 25-3, site plan for Norwich Collision Center, pre-plat for the villas at Pleasant Ridge Creek, and the final plat for the villas at Pleasant Ridge Creek.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for May 12th, 2025. Is that so? I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Very good. This is item F, Board of Zoning Appeals. This is F1, R1 zoning lot width and depth modification. So, quick background. From time to time, it is considered good practice to review the subdivision and zoning regulations to determine if any modifications or adoptions should be made. Post-World War II, developers introduced smaller lots to increase the output of housing to meet the demand imposed by returning GI soldiers from World War II. Lots could range from 0.16 to 0.20 of an acre, and homes were mass-produced. This was a shift to the suburbanization of the American landscape from the rural past. And so as the population increases locally, demand for housing goes up. However, with real wages not increasing at the rate of housing appreciation, coupled with higher rates for mortgages and the cost of infrastructure, increasing special assessments, the need to introduce a variety of housing becomes apparent to allow people in different income ranges to live in Goddard. The Planning Commission is reviewing reducing the minimum lot size requirements of the R1 zoning district from 60 width by 100 depth to 40 width by 80 depth to allow more lots to be built when new development is proposed. The Planning Commission is reviewing a policy amendment to change the minimum lot size, width, and depth from R1. Typical lots range currently in the R1 from 75 and 80 by 100. Current dimensions are 60 width, 100 depth allowed as a minimum in the R1. Proposed dimensions will be 40 foot width and 80 foot depth. And so as an economic review, I'm going to introduce a couple of slides and proposals that we've seen with fiscal impact analysis. So I'm just going to go through these and kind of some of the justification behind it. So for single family detached developments with an 80 foot width by 100 foot depth, if we were to assume that 75 acres generates about 188 lots or 2.5 lots per acre, and an average home is about 300,000, over time, as we have to do maintenance on the infrastructure for that proposed development, the total infrastructure cost comes out to about a little over $5 million, about $5.8 million. So when you have that typical lot, like you see in most developments, Seasons, Spring Hill, St. Andrews, the amount of revenue that's generated over time, over 35 years, amounts to about $3 million. So upon review, when we look at how much revenue we're generating off a development versus how much infrastructure maintenance costs we have, we actually generally, on average, have a deficit of about $2 million. So one thing to help offset this deficit, when we're looking at these projects that are being proposed coming forward, we consider the idea of shrinking some of the lots to introduce more output. And so let's say that we use the same development and use the most minimum lot available size in current R1, which is 60 by 100. With the same metrics, we still are deficient about $1.1 million over a 35-year period. So some of these numbers come up because you're thinking, it's easy to think that you have X number of housing units that are $300,000, they're all assessed at 11.5, multiply that, times our mill levy at 37, and you're thinking that's the amount of money we've captured out of that development, which is true, but then at the end of the day, you also have to subtract operating costs. You have to, I have to get paid, city administrator has to get paid, attorneys have to get paid, and at the end of the day, one thing that is really stuck out to me was that you only had about 7.9 mills actually being assessed to a development to actually capture enough money for road maintenance, which is still not going to be enough to actually offset the cost for road maintenance over time. And some of these road maintenance, they're small chunks over time, which is like a mill and overlay, but over time you have to do a big chunk of money that has to be dedicated towards maintenance for like $500,000 over here, and then also water and sewer lines, you have to replace them over a 35-year period, and those are when the big ticket items hit. So development might be sitting there generating positive returns for up to year like 30, and then at year 35, a complete negative inversion happens because of the amount of offset for maintenance that we have to do on that project. So, and we're seeing that now in a lot of areas like Old Town. It could be $1 million, $2 million, $3 million to rehabilitate the street, the sewer line, and the water line. And so we have to anticipate this, because you don't, generally it's good practice to try to put the city in a better place than when you leave than when you got there. You kind of want to put it in a better place, at least fiscally speaking. So if we shift again and say that we want to do the same thing, single family, but we're going to do 40 by 80 foot lots, we're assuming that we can get now about 4.5 lots per acre, because the general assumption is that we've decreased the lot size by about 46%, so we can increase the number of lots by about 46%. Now that's a general rough metric, but it generates about 338 lots now off 75 acres. Now the average home drops, but at the end of the day, if the average home drops to about, let's say we set it at 300,000, we just keep it the way it is. But then we're generating about a positive net of $810,000 as opposed to, a deficit of 1.1 million or $2 million. Now, to keep this, you'd actually have to break even. To break even and say that the amount of revenue we're collecting over 35 years is equivalent, the zero-sum gain to the maintenance over 35 years, the average home would have to be about $233,000. So if you introduce 338 lots at $233,000, you have about a break-even point for that's over a 35-year period. So all that to say that financially speaking, it'll be a small publication cost for the public hearing, which we're going to have today. And then any consideration that goes before City Council, they would have to make final decision on that, and then there have to be a publication in the Times Sentinel for the ordinance. Legally, it's approved as a form. It is recommended that the Planning Commission have the Planning Commission chair open the public hearing, receive comments, close the public hearing, and approve the changes to subdivision regulations amending the R1 zoning lot requirements, minimum lot width and lot depth. And I will say that Ryan Schrack, thank goodness to him, he actually said, Michael, what about lot coverage? Because obviously if you reduce the lot size and you keep the lot percentages the same for lot coverage, it shrinks the available footprint. And so we're going to propose a lot coverage amendment in the July meeting as well to help offset that. But at this point, Mr. Chair, if you want to open the public hearing.
All right, we'll open the public hearing.
Very good. Anybody who wants to speak on this matter can. First and last name and your address.
Amanda Treadwell, 410 Richard Road in Goddard. I'm speaking on behalf as the chairwoman of the Goddard Senior Citizens Advisory Board. One of the things that we have been doing is getting a lot of feedback from our seniors about different needs, gaps, and services that they need. The conversation has come up several times about housing and just getting some additional housing options for them. So I'm definitely in favor, specifically around the Old Goddard area, where we can now possibly build onto those smaller lots to help with infill and put some smaller housing on there. So that way we can, have some 2-bedroom, 1-bath, or look at some additional housing options that we can provide our seniors that is a little bit more affordable. A lot of our seniors, if they go to Dove Estates or Silver Linings or another facility, it's a minimum of $7,000 a month for them to be able just to get in there, and then it goes up from there. So when we look at different housing options, we've be a lot of great projects coming up, but for our single family, specifically in Old Goddard, where there's a lot more of that walkability, I think having the option to be able to build some smaller homes, some of these smaller lots with infill would be definitely a bonus and a great opportunity for us to solve multiple problems. So I'm definitely for it.
Anybody else? Mr. Chair, you can close the public hearing.
All right, close the public hearing.
Very good. At this point, it's deliberation. Questions, comments?
Mike, can I come and make a couple comments?
Of course, absolutely.
Now you missed your opportunity.
Honorable Planning Commission, I prefer to speak outside the hearing. That way, if you guys have questions, we could share a two-way dialogue. But I want to reiterate a couple of points that my colleague made, because I think that this right here is the least talked about issue as it relates to the housing problems that we have in our society, not just in the city of Goddard. And that is that if single-family development is all a community primarily has, we are robbing our future selves. Single-family developments are a losing math equation when you look at the revenue that is generated over the life cycle compared to the cost of the infrastructure that's required to serve those homes. We have about, once everything that's cleared entitlements is built out, I think we're at about 2.5 single-family units to every one two-family unit. Just speaking in two-family units, not things greater than that, such as Class A apartments. In a perfect urban planning ecosystem, you have a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio of all different types of housing types. So for every one single-family unit, you got one two-family unit, you got one three-family unit, you got one Class A apartment, you got one mixed use, maybe you live above a retail shop. So I understand the immense value of maintaining our community's identity, which is single-family homes on half-acre or greater lots. But again, the facts are the facts. This is a simple math equation that those projects are not contributing the revenue necessary to sustain them. And so I think the easy question after that is then why do we continue to grow and approve them? Well, we call it the growth Ponzi scheme. You have to continue to grow to have the additional revenue to take care of what you've already put in the ground. I'm talking about houses that have been here 50, 60, 70 years. My colleague gave a prime example. We're replacing 7 or 8 blocks of water main and a whole new street here in downtown Goddard, 1st and 3rd Street. We're talking about multi-million-dollar projects that have homes on them whose valuations don't even provide a small fraction of what's necessary to finance those improvements. Without the growth, single-family, two-family, or otherwise, we don't have the revenue to take care of our core and what we've already invested decades ago. And so what we look at is opportunities for smart growth. That's residential density. My colleague Micah put it pretty succinctly here. You start to see green, the more lots and the more value we're able to generate for the same amount of infrastructure. So we don't talk about this a lot, and I totally empathize with those that are clamoring that there's too many duplexes or too many of these certain housing types. You know, the reason why you hear city staff advocating for these types of things is not because we're trying to help a developer make more money. It's because we're looking at the 2nd and 3rd generation that's coming behind us and the infrastructure that's going to be needed to serve the homes that are going to be there. So these are things that we got to continue to talk about and dialogue on. This is a really simple opportunity here to achieve one smart growth strategy and to continue to have single-family homes, and that's reducing, as he shared with you, those minimum lot sizes, increasing the total lot coverage, and reducing the setback requirements. So this is what an affordable single-family home looks like in 2025. That's why we invest in green space, nice park systems, because the yard is becoming less of a thing if you want to be in the low 2s as far as a home price goes. So Micah covered a lot of this in a great way, but I just wanted to belabor the point a little bit further. Maybe you can tighten that up.
At this point, it's just deliberation. Questions that you guys might have?
You mentioned next month that you would potentially have a change in the lot coverage. Any thoughts on what that would be right now? I think it's 35%, 50.
It's currently 35. But we figured if we adopted this today, a 40 by 80, that's a 3,200 foot lot. 50% of that would be a 1,600 square foot building for footprint. So that's kind of what we were thinking.
Well, to the point of the previous speaker, I mean, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, the other alternative is you raise the mill levy, right? I mean, to be able to get to that,
Yeah.
to be able to get to these points.
Yeah, that's one option. You know, we could try to pass a 1% sales tax. There's different ways that we can try to increase revenue.
There's gonna be tax increase in some capacity, whatever it is.
Yeah, typically, you know, as city administrator put it, it's like you approve one development and you're almost like you're gonna hand off sort of an empty bag to your future, your predecessor, you know, whoever's taking over in the future, you like hand over an empty bag with a deficit. And so then they go, well, I have a deficit, you know, I have a new chief financial officer, we have a deficit. How do we make up for that deficit? We'll raise the mill levy. You know, it's fairly straightforward. That's the easiest thing to do because it doesn't require necessarily a vote. Maybe they do a 1% sales tax increase to, you know, help offset it because then people coming in from out of town will help offset that cost. But yeah, typically it's going to be a mill levy increase.
Does this cost of specials just cover the installation of street sewer?
That's right. So it's the upfront cost of infrastructure. So specials, when we adopt and receive specials, it's for the installation of the infrastructure, the existing infrastructure at the time. And then we're fighting two battles, which you're all aware of. The two battles are, you know, the decline of the actual material itself over time. You have to replace it, and inflation. So you put in $1 million of infrastructure now, and you have to replace it at $1.2 million 35 years down the road. So the numbers that I have on the maintenance actually take into account two things. And this report's not like we have a report, but it's not public yet, and I'm still refining some of it. But just to kind of give you some of the background, we're doing a twofold sort of statistic here at the same time. You're doing an appreciation of the real estate and an inflationary adjustment at the same time. And so we're saying that you have these two type of metrics that are competing against each other: the appreciation of the real estate and then the inflation of the dollar. And so, you know, we're assuming the appreciation in this metric stays ahead of inflation, which is not unreasonable because it's real estate, generally speaking, tends to appreciate very well. And on average, the metric I used was 3.88% annually, which is pretty accurate. It kind of does this thing. And inflation right now is about 3 when I did this study. So I'm saying that the appreciation is ahead of inflation, but it's still the inflation is pulling it down. So you're not going to get exactly, you know, it's kind of doing this drag metric as you're going forward into time, but you're losing value as you move forward into time. And, you know, the further out you get with any metric, the less reliable it gets. But it's not unreasonable to say that inflation is here forever, and it's not unreasonable to say that something depreciates, something that's going to decline in the material composition is going to decline over time. So those are two fair assumptions, but I can't tell you exactly what the inflation would be in 35 years. So.
What does this do to mitigate what we have today? I mean, this is a proposal for future developments.
That's right.
We are doing maintenance today we can't, or we're not, I shouldn't say can, but are having to pay for.
So what we do when we have projects like this, we put them on the CIP, which is the capital improvement program, and we also will borrow money. So we'll put a general obligation bond, which the city at large will pay for. So everybody in city limits will pay for that general obligation bond because it's dedicated with tax revenue, generally speaking. And so that's how we fix existing infrastructure. We borrow. It's kind of like if your car broke down, you put it on a credit card instead of having cash reserve. So our cash reserves tend to go up and down. We're doing pretty good. And I'm not the chief financial officer, so please don't quiz me on what our cash reserves look like. But generally speaking, big ticket items for a city of our size, $1 million plus, they're going to be bonded, generally speaking.
On a 40-foot wide lot, what's the side yard going to be?
Depending on where you put the building, so you could sit it right on the lot line, in which case you would have more side yard space, or you could put it closer to the middle. You know, it's hard to say until you actually see a building footprint.
So we're doing away with the setbacks on the sides?
No, you'd still have a side yard. It just would probably have to be reduced. But we're actually going to talk about a proposed project on H1, and then we can discuss a little bit of that as well, because there would be the possibility of how does that building actually sit. At 1,600, let's say the maximum was 1,600 for the footprint. How does it actually sit on the lot? We would have to see. But we would also probably want to reduce the setbacks, either through a variance, which we're going to discuss in H1, or a setback reduction that we would consider approving as an amendment again to subdivision regulations. So that's something else that we want to consider.
So does all this take into consideration all the extra traffic that you're going to be adding to the infrastructure now?
Yeah, so it doesn't necessarily take into account all the extra infrastructure traffic, like the traffic to the infrastructure damage, because typically when you look at decline of a road, you're gonna be looking at trucks and commercial freight and that type of thing, but ultimately, additional cars, I don't know if there's really a good metric for that, it's probably not. I didn't say that additional cars are gonna decrease the value that, decrease the road faster, just because you introduce a couple more units, I can't tell you that definitively. Like, I don't have a metric for that, I should say I don't have a metric for that.
Can I answer that?
Sure, go for it.
There again, it reckons back to what I mentioned previous. The more folks that you have kicking into the hat, the more revenue that there is to improve the street. That's the issue. I mean, without the growth, there's no money to take care of things. You gotta have pressure first before we can go in and make those improvements. We gotta have the taxpayers all contributing. And if we can get, let's say, 100 lots in versus 50, now we have a better ability to finance the roadway improvements that are needed. Less revenue, less pressure, it's gonna be further down the road before we can make those improvements.
So currently the minimum lot width is 60 feet.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe that you said that typically developers are choosing to do 70 to 80 feet.
70 to 80 has been the standard for a long time. In 2019, we reduced it to 60 as the minimum, which was allowed. Originally, 75 was the minimum in 2019, and we reduced it to 60-foot width. And then but that being in that situation, that was sort of ahead of the game, and now we're seeing developments where they want to do 60 as their minimum. In fact, Arbor Creek South is platted at 60. 80 lots are 80 by like 100, but the rest of them, the other 160 lots are 60 by 100. So they're choosing the preponderance of that development is the minimum, which is interesting. So I'm just trying to keep ahead of what I see the market starting to do, and I don't know, since I can't read the future, I'm guessing that if we can reduce it to a minimum, it'll allow developers to be able to do that. But that doesn't mean they have to do that. That they still could build a development that's 100 feet by 100 feet, the lots, they can make them as big as they want to be. It's typically what we see with the market correction when federal fund rates go up, and mortgage rates for the 30-year go up. People want to build smaller lots because then they can spread the specials further, and then they'll actually be able to move the homes. But then they run into the subdivision regulation and say you can't go less than 60. So if we allow it to reduce for sort of more laissez-faire market and say you can go down to 40 if you want to, then maybe they can put a mix of lots in there to help offset the specials and the development to move forward, and then we would actually be able to generate a little more cash flow to help offset our long-term maintenance costs. So we have seen it, and we are seeing a little bit more of that.
What are our options here? So we've come up with a couple things. So lot coverage, setbacks, we've had some things that are unanswered that would have to be submitted anyway for approval. What are our options as far as this particular one tonight? I mean, can we defer this if we, and the reason I ask my question is I would kind of like to see the big picture. Like with the other items with it, so it's a 50%, because if you're saying 1,600 square feet on a 3,200 square foot lot, by the time you add a garage, these houses aren't that big.
They're smaller
If you want a
houses.
shed, that's not, all these things have to be taken into account. So is 50% really the number we're looking at, or should it be less? Should it be more?
Really, it's just introducing a different type of lifestyle housing choice.
Right.
Yeah, that's all it is. And so when you're saying you're reducing the requirements for the minimum size, it allows a developer to introduce a different housing style choice. But it doesn't deny anybody who wants to do a traditional development from being able to do a traditional
Absolutely.
development. Yeah, that's not right. So this one, the recommendation is to improve it so that we can, consider reducing it. So when developers ask me if we can do a 40 by 100 foot lot, we can say yes, or, as an example. But in terms of, do you want to see what the minimum lot coverage would look like, or do you want us to do some sort of a mock-up or something of that nature? Is that what you're asking for like a lot coverage?
I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to see all the proposed pieces together.
All the proposed pieces together?
So we're going to change it to 40 by 80. We're going to go to 50% if that's the chosen number, and we're going to put the setbacks at whatever it is. And C, instead of doing it in steps.
Okay.
And I don't know if anyone agrees with that.
I agree, and I think it would be better if you, I don't disagree with this at all, but I do think it would be better if you brought all the pieces together and presented them in one shot. It would be easier to, I agree with you, it would be easier to see how it's all in intertwining effect, because I think you're on the right track.
Okay.
I
So-
think the 40-foot would have, is just way too small. Way too small. Minimum 50.
And that's kind of what I'm wondering. You know, 40 foot is fine, but if you have 10 feet on either side or 6 foot on either side, well, now all of a sudden you're really narrowing that
Air conditioning for running.
potentially. And if you choose to do that, I understand that's a buyer choice, that's a builder, you know, a developer choice. But
Sure.
again, I would like the opportunity to discuss it with all the pieces.
Sure, sure. So
Because then maybe we
today,
may choose 60%, if that's even, that way, because again, you know, I mean, 1,600 square feet, if you do a 3-car garage, is barely 1,200 feet in the house.
Mhm.
And so, I just want to make sure that's what.
Okay. Yeah, today it would simply be whatever your recommendation is for the subdivision regulation change for this particular one. So if you're like, I don't want to see it, then it'll go before city council and I'll tell city council, planning commission doesn't like it, right? And if you do want to see it and you want to see the other extra pieces added later, then you would approve it today, then I would go tell city council that you did approve it. And city council will make a deliberation if they want to either accept it or deny it or, you know, what they want to do with it at that point. Once it goes to city council, they can table it, they can veto you with a supermajority, they can accept it with a simple majority. If you accept it, you know, basically do the same thing that you would traditionally see on a zoning case. So it's the same concept. So whatever you recommend tonight will then go before city council and they will deliberate. And like I said, if you guys say no and they say we do want it, then they would need 4 out of 5. If you guys say no and they say we're also a no, then they would just need, you know, 3 out of 5 as a simple majority. And then if you guys said yes and they also said yes, it'd be a simple majority, 3 out of 5. If you said yes and they said no, then it would require 4 of them to say no. So that's how policy changes.
So let's say we say no, under the pretense that we would like to see the rest of the pieces. Does that information get communicated?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Any
So they would
recommendation-
understand
Yeah.
the reasoning. Because again, I'm not sure I'm opposed. I think I would like to see all the pieces.
Sure, yeah.
So is that how that would be presented then?
Yeah, so
Your
it's,
no
if
vote
you
or
said,
no?
if you said no and then of course there has to be a reason, like, and I convey that to city council, like, planning commission said no, you know, the vote was whatever out of whatever, and here's why, and they want to say X, Y, Z, you know, that type of situation. And
Micah,
so,
can they table it so you can bring it back to them as a package and then send a recommendation on to the council?
I think yeah, technically I think you probably could table it since it's not a zoning, so you could table it if you wanted to take it back. So I'm not obligated to have to take it to city council within 14 days like a zoning. So you could technically table it, and then I could bring it back in July if you wanted to, and then you can make a formal decision at that point, and then I would take it back to city council at that point. That's what I would go with, if you wanted to consider that as well.
See the motion then?
Yeah, I can't make one. I mean, and again, I don't want to speak for all of you, but that's just kind of the way.
Other than I don't like the 40-foot width, 50 should be minimum. Used to be 60.
How do we, you know, it seems like I wasn't on this board for a little over a year now, but, I mean, I think every housing condition that's come before the board since I've been on it, I think it's either been duplex or conditional to go smaller. I mean, how do we, you know, if we keep watering down the requirements, how do we urge people to build another St. Andrews or another Seasons or another Talia? I mean, how do you get that, or is that just 100% market and?
That's market. It's just market. It's a little difficult because ultimately a developer can build $1 million homes, but somebody has to buy them. Somebody could build a tiny home that's only 500 square foot, but maybe nobody would buy those either. So they could build 1,500,000 square foot homes and nobody would buy them. They build $500 million homes and nobody buys those either. It's really just market. When the federal fund rate goes up, mortgages follow because banks have to borrow from other banks at that rate, at least at that rate. So then if rates go up, people buy smaller homes, you know, if they can. So, and also there's something called an appraisal gap. If I say my house is worth $300,000 and I go to sell it, And the bank says, sorry, with a market correction, your house is only worth $250,000. That means you have to come up with $50,000 in cash to make up that difference, or I have to drop the cost of my house. And so people think that homes just go up forever, and of course 2008 said otherwise, but it'll dip and go up and dip and go up. But we try to stay ahead of the market so that when you introduce new housing styles, people can dive into that market right away and not go somewhere else like maybe to Bel Air or so we just try to stay in the market. But that doesn't prohibit somebody from building that. It's just radically expensive for them and us. And a developer told me that he wants to sell 30 houses a year. And the more expensive it is, that restricts your buyer pool. $1 million home, when it's select amount of buyers, are you related to the Cokes or not? That type of thing. After that, the less expensive a house gets, opens up the buyer pool, so houses move faster. It's just economics. That's all I was really just trying to move numbers around.
Do you need a motion to table, or whatever the motion is?
I make a motion to table till July, and we bring back this with all the corresponding, other items that would be set back for reviews.
Okay.
Whose size, the lot size?
I think we can talk about that.
I'll second it.
Okay.
All in favor?
Can I ask a-
Yep.
Is this gonna delay anything from this point to that? I mean, is there anything in the works that would it be delayed because of this tabling decision?
No. No.
Any
No,
variance?
we're not gonna do PDA in there.
Oh.
We're gonna do something different. We'll talk about his project differently. We'll do it over the finance. We'll talk about each one in a little. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Anybody else? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Alright.
Very good. Bring it back up in July. Old business, there is none. New businesses is H1. This is Garber presentation, Trails End Phase 2 concept. So I'm going to give you all this, and I do have everybody Garber behind me as agent for the applicant. And we're going to go through this, but I just want you to know that I just found out that this is changing a little bit even now. So even now, this is old information, even though I just put this together. So on April 14th of 2025, the Planning Commission reviewed and approved the preliminary and final replat of the Goddard Trails and Development. On April 29th of 2025, the City Council approved the final replat. Since that time, developers have considered the possibility of introducing modified single-family homes on smaller lots to accommodate more growth and density in the development. This would require another replat of the area along with the variance requests for minimum lot sizes and setback reductions. I should also say, not just, yes, the minimum lot size and setback reductions, that's what we do. Planning Commission is reviewing a preliminary concept to be proposed by the developer to replat the remaining portion of the Goddard Trails and Development to introduce additional lots for single-family development. The original plat remaining lots were about 58. So we had 58 lots left that were being replatted. The new plat would introduce 110, but I think we're moving away from that. So the additional was 52. This is all information. I think at this point I'm just going to hand it over to Eric Glover. Yeah, I'm just stepping down because he's got new information. Developers are changing tackle with it, so it's probably good to just let him talk on it.
Thanks for this opportunity to speak. This is something that we're looking at. This is Trails End. The remaining lots available are in the light blue. Originally, the developers had asked me to look at redoing all of them to this different product. But after having drawn it and sent it to them, it was the first time they had seen it. This thing is kind of on a rocket ship to getting done. They decided that the only area they actually want to redo is the top piece. So this area right here was replatted to what's known as Trails End Second, and it has some narrower lots, 65-foot lots, which fit within the zoning. They were bigger before. I think we were able to get 4 or 5 more lots out of that area by doing that. We didn't change any of the streets, just some of those more rectangular lots. We just were able to squeeze a few extra lots by narrowing the lot slightly, but within the zoning. This would be the new concept, and just focus on this piece up here. It would be a mix of 40 and 45-foot lots. And essentially this new product is you would take a duplex and you would pull it apart by 5 feet. So the distance between two of the halves will be 5 feet. And then on the outside would be your normal setback, a 5-foot setback. So on the other side you've had 10 feet in between units. So you would just have the narrower setback on one side. And it's something that, I don't know if they've seen it elsewhere, but I know of 2 other subdivisions, one in Mays, one in Park City, that are doing the same unit. This allows us a little more density in this area, and it's a product that the market's saying is moving. Here's pictures of the units. I believe this is Falcon Falls. This is what those units would look like. You will not have 3-car garages on these units. It's the lot width does not allow 3 cars, so it's going to be 2-car garages. And this is that narrow setback, so 5 foot between units, and those would be 2-hour fire walls in between the units. So just like a duplex, which has the firewall in between the units, these units would have firewalls on that narrow side. These aren't indicative of the floor plans. These are just units. The spacing, I believe they would actually center the units on the lot line, so it'd be 2.5 either side. But one side could have a 0 setback. I mean, it's just by zoning or HOA requirements would give access to those sorts of things. I guess, do you have any questions about this product or what we're looking to do?
There's a new development on 21st Street, kind of east of 167th, that's got a really close house. Is that the one you said was in Maine?
No, this is, I believe 53rd Street just east of K96 is the Maze one. Falcon Falls is the one in Park City, and that is on Hillside just north of 254 on the east side of the road. The one at 151st and 21st Street is actually duplex housing, and I think that makes it look a little closer than they are, but those are actually 5-foot setbacks, side yard setbacks, so that's 10 feet between every unit. So, but yeah, that subdivision is 100% duplex.
It'll be slab on grade or basement?
It'll be slab on grade. And the density helps. I mean, in 2019, if I busted $150 a month on specials, my developers they'd be very angry with me. Now, if I can get under $300 a month, I'm a hero. So we had a subdivision in Mays that broke 500 because of groundwater, so infrastructure was expensive. But the denser we can get these, that helps. I will tell you, we had a bid. We lost a bid on Friday on a small subdivision because fire hydrants, valves, and fittings have all jumped 20 to 25% in 1 week. So I think prices are just continuing to go up. So density helps with those specials.
With the change to what's in our packet versus what you're saying, is there anything to actually vote on tonight, or is this more information at this point?
Yeah, just basically.
We're trying to get ahead of the game
Yeah.
to make sure that we weren't going to get slaughtered if we spent a bunch of time putting everything together. We want to make sure that we would, the concept, you're okay with the concept of it, then we could move forward and spend the time to really tie this down.
Is that becoming normal to put one side of the house right on the property line?
Um,
That's what I'm
it's-
seeing in the picture.
Yeah, it's highly unusual for us around here. We're used to the seasons, we're used to St. Andrews, we're used to, it's more of, some of these products are coming from other places because now the market dictates that you be, more available to make different choices and have different options. Those single family homes on the big lots are getting too expensive, the specials are getting too high. So now our developers are looking outside of Wichita for different products, just like the house apartment at 135th and Maple. If you've seen that on the northwest corner, it's apartments, but they're single family homes in an apartment complex shape. That I saw that came from Dallas, which probably came from Vegas. But those things are coming into our market simply to give them other options. So this is fairly new for us, but like I said, we have 2 subdivisions going in right now with this concept in our area.
How close are they to the street?
That doesn't change. You have your 14.5 feet from the back of curb to the street right away, and then you have a 25-foot building setback to the house. It's exactly the same as a normal subdivision. The only thing that changes is the side yard.
And from what I see in the side yard, on one side there's nothing.
Yeah,
It's right on the line.
yeah, that's a possibility. It depends on how you want to write your access. I think if you have a 0 lot line on one side, and this would be getting into the weeds, how your access agreements are, because obviously maintenance is going to happen in between these homes.
You gotta maybe-
So it'll be written into the HOA agreement, and it may make it easier to have one person have the entirety of that setback, just for legal reasons.
And what does that give them on the other side?
The other side would be a standard 5-foot setback. So the narrow setback would only be every other lot line. The other
Yeah.
side would be 5 foot, so you'd have 10 between units, just like normal setback. And I don't have a good picture of the other side.
This is kind of in the weeds too, but I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What goes between the 2 units that are in the small setback, is that determined by the homeowners, or is that something that would be taken care of? Like, they would all be rock, or?
See, that's another reason to have a 0 yard setback, because it would be, the one side would have to maintain that. And typically, and you can see here, they typically use rock.
You're gonna get no sunlight in there.
It would be difficult to grow anything. All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So financially and non-legally, approve this point, it's recommended the planning commission deliberate and advise Garver on any sentiment towards the project and the possibility of a variance. The reason I say variance is because when we spoke with Garver, they were thinking PUD, I was thinking PUD. We talked internally with staff, and we were thinking, how could we address this in a way that didn't require PUD? Because PUD is just long-winded, it's a custom zoning classification, takes longer than any other type of zoning classification. So we could keep it the way it is as an R2 and do a variance, which would, with specific provisions in there. The variance would be to reduce the lot size requirements, to reduce the setback requirements, and you could do it that way. So they'd have to still replat, they'd replat and submit a variance to get to the lot sizes and setbacks that they want. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I know
Be quicker.
it would be faster, and so that's kind of what we were deciding amongst staff of how to navigate through the subdivision regulations to get to this type of product. So that's kind of where we're at.
And because of the replat, there wouldn't be any need to stipulate it has to stay with this current owner or anything like that, because once it's replatted, it's a done deal, right? With the variance included.
Yes, yeah, it's a done deal at that point, but developer, especially a traditional developer like this, they're just gonna build or they're gonna sell lots to builders. So it's just gonna be like any other type of residential development. In terms of renter versus owner, we don't get into the weeds in that. We just stay away per the attorney's recommendation. We can't tell you what to do with your own personal properties. But it's knowing these developers, they're going to either build them themselves or they'll sell the lots to builders who are gonna build a like product. So. Oh yeah, that's a good one. When we had a meeting with Garba's office, Tina mentioned the idea of variability in colors and facades to help offset, because we've heard that, sometimes when you have a product that's replicated, it can be redundant and then it has a stale feeling, and so Tina Powell mentioned the idea of asking the developers to vary it up a little bit so that you have different colors, different facades, different schemes, and so I think we've always agreed to that to help still generate a better output.
Personally, I think it's a great concept because it is what the buyers are asking for. Smaller yards, smaller houses, unfortunately. And I like the fact that you're splitting them up. They're not duplexes anymore. It gives it a different look and a different feeling, I would hope. Do you know if there's any plan, as you make the yard smaller, kids have less places to play? Are they going to do a park? Do you know, community park or?
This subdivision does have a community park with a pool, and I believe they're putting in pickleball courts. So it's further to the south, but this also backs up to the trail. So.
Where's the fat?
215 and 23rd. So this is 215 and this is a trail. More of the developments down here, 23rd down here, and you keep going up down, these distributions over here, and then 54 is like back here. Maybe I need to take you guys on a party bus tour.
There we go.
Look at these developments. I got that idea from Vegas. No, I didn't.
No, I would second the chair's comments. I mean, I think that it is the product the market's requesting. Frankly, what our preferences are don't matter, right? I mean, sure, but 20 years ago, somebody would have said, here's how we're building all these lots. They would have thought we were crazy at that time. So, the reality is this is what the market's requesting. It's better for the city, as we just previously discussed. So I think it's win-win all around.
All right. If there's no other comments, then at this point we'll probably just go ahead and present the same thing to City Council. Let's get a pulse check on them, and then hopefully we can move forward with a replat and some variances. Sound good?
Yep.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
You want to stay for the rest of the night, if not? I have one item. One very, very long item. No, I'm just kidding. This is item H2. This is a site plan for the salt sand building for the Public Works. So the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, KDHE, informed the city that the current salt sand building is deficient, needed to be remediated or replaced. The city decided with the growth happening, it would be best to build a new salt sand building near the power substation off of 199, just north of the existing Public Works building. Since the building is considered commercial, the planning commission should review it in the same way as a traditional commercial building, but with the understanding that staff compiled images and the contractor submitted the renderings, and so it's not a traditional site plan like you would get from an architect, because this is a building for the city that's being built by the city for the city. So that being said, planning commission is reviewing a general site plan of the salt sand building for the Public Works Department. It's located off of 199 north of the current Public Works building. The height is 32 feet, 3 inches, the width is 52 by 60, the gross square footage is 3,120. It's the Public Works, it's NABCD approved currently. So This is the location, so that's that substation, this is 199, the public works building is lower back here, so we've already built the pad for it, and gotten it ready and prepped. Obviously, we got a lot of rain, so we're gonna have to check that out. This is a concept of what it looks like. Financially, non-legally approved as a form. It is recommended planning commission just approve the site plan for the salt sand building. We do have Nick Ball, Public Works Department here. So if you guys do have any questions for them, feel free to ask Nick.
What's the life expectancy of these covers? In this Kansas weather.
Kansas weather and wind.
Depends on the storm that we have, yeah.
For what it's worth, this is a similar building to what you see around KDOT builds. I can't speak to too many specifics. I've just jumped in the middle of this project. I would imagine those are like a 20-year lifespan or something like what you would put on top of commercial roofing or something.
Cement pad?
They'll pour cement on the inside of it. The rest of it is just like a packed cement. And while you're all waiting, I'll just say it's to both protect the salt from the rainwater mostly, because it causes it to crust up and makes it clumpy and hard to apply. But primarily, as KDHE is concerned, it prevents runoff, and then the salt pollutes the environment around it. And our current building isn't big enough to house the amount of salt that we get for almost a single storm event at this point. We used a lot of salt in a couple of storms we had this year, and required a couple of deliveries. This building should be able to contain that and then some, so it would keep it out of the rain and keep the runoff from going down into the streams and stuff.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Keep salt dry.
Well, and also the plastic covering, there's a lot of corrosion due to the salt. So any metal, the more metal you have, the more corrosion you have. There's also a lot more cost in the construction if you had an entirely metal building. And I would imagine that plastic is probably a lot cheaper to replace than a lot of any other structure that they put there.
I'm assuming that superstructure is aluminum, no matter galvanized.
Probably galvanized. It looks like it's been unloaded. It was prefab and it's sitting over on the side of the building. So if you drive down 199, you can see through the fence there. It looks like galvanized.
I'll make a motion to approve the site plan for the salt sand building.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good. This is item I, this is staff report. So I like to inflict my economic reports upon you, so this is no different. I went ahead and took the square miles of a select amount of cities from 2008 to present. Just kind of show you how big we've gotten over time compared to other cities. Surprisingly, Keachai is actually a big city in terms of square footage, in terms of square miles, I should say, but not a big city in terms of population. So it's kind of interesting to look at how cities have generally grown. But annexation-wise, Valley Center has grown pretty rapidly since 2022. In Goddard, we sort of had a small uptick here as we overpaced Hayesville and catching up with Keachai and hopefully Bel Air, but that's kind of our footprint, our growth for the square miles. this is the city's population. The reason why 212 is chopped off is because I don't have that data. But 2008 to 2025 for the city's population. Derby obviously is ahead of everybody. But you can see here that our population, we were ahead of Keachai and kind of neck and neck in Mays. And then we were ahead of Mays, and then Mays started to outpace us 2016, 2017, 2018, and they've kept ahead of us. And then we've had a sharp uptick here in 2024, and we're starting to catch up again in 2025. We're catching up with Valley Center, which is good. I consider it as a competitive thing, so I just kind of, when I say we're catching up, I feel like, it's not the Kentucky Derby, I get it, but like we're catching up. So we're all pretty neck and neck here. What's really interesting though is when you take this metric and this metric, and so you take the city population, the city population divided by the square miles, you get a population density metric. And so what's really interesting is Hayesville is way up there. It's a very dense, according to this information, which is shocking. I'm not very familiar with Hayesville, so I don't know what kind of land uses they have over there. But Bel Air also has had a sharp uptick in density since 2021 especially. It's just had a really sharp uptick. So you guys are probably more familiar with these areas than I am. And I'm curious about the composition, but Valley Center actually has had a decline. So you see they were going up and up and up in density, and then they started to decline. So as they've grown, they've actually lost density over time, which is really kind of interesting. Park City is not very dense. Mays is definitely catching up in density, but not as dense as we are. And so ideally, we would like to see this trend going into the future where we become more dense, simply because what would be really interesting is to compare this information to their operating budgets, because that's where you really get some really interesting information. There's the density relationship between that and their operating budgets, because it would be interesting just to see how much revenue they're able to generate off that density. And so I don't have their operating budgets, but I'm going to look at that and try to do some analysis and make a determination there. But it's just kind of interesting to see how that plays out over time, because some cities have really taken a march on that. Hayesville, especially Bel Air. And obviously we're there as well. We're introducing more density as well. And then some cities have trickled off in terms of density. Keachai obviously has a lot of land, but not a lot of population. So they're very low in terms of density. That's it for me. So moving on to commissioner comments.
No,
We're easy today.
should be quiet today.
No comments. And then an adjournment. Next meeting will be July 14th. I will bring the reductions to the R1 as a compiled list. Maybe I can bring some examples of what it would look like if we actually had building on it. It might be helpful to kind of illustrate that.
Great. I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
I wasn't asking every question.